The knock came at exactly 11:42 p.m. Not loud, not aggressive. Just 3 slow knocks on the door. Most people would ignore something like that. But I had lived alone long enough to know when something felt wrong. So I walked toward the front door slowly. The hallway light was off. The street outside was quiet. When I looked through the peephole, I froze. Because standing on the porch were the 2 people I hadn't seen in 12 years. My parents. The same parents who told me I was a burden. The same parents who sent me away when I was 16 years old. And the strange thing was, they didn't look angry. They looked desperate. My mother kept wringing her hands. My father looked exhausted. And when I finally opened the door slightly, my father said the one sentence I never expected to hear from him. "We need your help." Before I explain why my parents suddenly showed up at my house after 12 years, my name is Elena Carter. I'm 28 years old, and this happened 2 winters ago in Denver, Colorado. Before we continue, if you enjoy stories where the truth slowly unfolds and the ending changes everything, consider subscribing. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is right now. I read every single comment. Now let me explain why my parents once called me a burden, because that story starts long before the night they knocked on my door. I still remember the exact word my father used. Burden. Not difficult, not troubled. A burden. He said it like he was describing a broken appliance, something inconvenient that needed to be removed. And the worst part was, my mother didn't disagree. She just sat there quietly at the kitchen table, avoiding my eyes. The conversation happened late at night. I had just turned 16. School had been difficult that year. My grades dropped slightly. Not failing, just struggling. But my father treated it like a catastrophe. "This is exactly what I warned about," he said. "You're holding everyone back." 2 weeks later, they made the decision. They said I would be moving. Not to another school, not to another relative, to a boarding facility 2 states away. They called it a structured program. But the message was clear. They didn't want me at home anymore. The morning I left was strangely quiet. No emotional speeches, no hugs. My mother packed 1 suitcase. My father drove me to the bus station. When the bus arrived, he handed me the ticket and said something I'll never forget. "This is what's best for everyone." I sat by the window for 6 hours, watching the city disappear behind us. I kept waiting for my phone to ring, for my mother to call, for my father to say they changed their minds. But the phone stayed silent. And eventually, I understood something painful. They weren't going to change their minds. The place they sent me to wasn't a school. It was more like a residential program. Strict schedules, counselors, mandatory therapy sessions. Most of the other kids were there because of serious behavioral problems, drugs, violence, trouble with the law. I was there because my parents decided I was inconvenient. That first night I couldn't sleep. Not because the place was loud, because it wasn't. It was silent. The kind of silence that makes you realize something important. You're alone. Completely alone. During the first few months, I wrote letters home. Short ones at first, then longer ones. I asked how things were. I asked if they visited my room. I asked if they missed me. None of the letters were answered. Not one. After 6 months, I stopped writing. Because eventually you understand something. If someone wants you in their life, they respond. Silence is an answer too. And my parents had made their answer very clear. 2 years later, I left the program at 18. No one came to pick me up. No one asked where I was going. So I did what many people in my situation do. I started over. New city, new job, new life. And for the next 12 years, I never heard from my parents again. Until the night they knocked on my door. When I left that program at 18, I had two things: one suitcase and $87. No parents waiting outside, no relatives calling, just a bus ticket to Denver that one of the counselors helped me arrange. I remember stepping off that bus thinking something simple: if I was going to survive, I would have to build my life completely on my own. My first job was at a small diner downtown. Nothing glamorous. I worked early mornings washing dishes, sometimes 12 hours a day, but the owner, a woman named Maria, noticed something about me. I didn't complain. I just worked. And after 3 months, she offered me a second position: waitressing during evening shifts. A year later, I saved enough money to rent a tiny studio apartment, one room, one window, and a mattress on the floor. But it was mine. The first space in my life where no one could tell me I didn't belong there. At 21, I started taking night classes, business management, accounting, anything that could help me move forward. I studied after work until 2 in the morning most nights, because when you grow up hearing you're a burden, proving people wrong becomes very motivating. By 24, I wasn't working in the diner anymore. I had saved enough money to open a small logistics consulting service. It started with just 2 clients, then 5, then 15. 3 years later, I owned a small but successful company. My life became simple: work, gym, occasional dinners with friends, no family holidays, no birthday calls. At first, that silence hurt, but eventually it became something else: peaceful, because there were no more expectations, no more judgment. And then one winter night, 12 years after I last saw them, someone knocked on my door. 3 slow knocks. I walked toward the entrance slowly, looked through the peephole, and saw 2 faces I hadn't seen since I was 16. My father looked older, much older. His shoulders were slumped. My mother kept glancing at the ground nervously. They didn't look confident. They looked desperate. Which was strange, because my parents were never the type of people who asked for help. If you're still here listening to this story, thank you. Moments like this are strange, because sometimes the people who once pushed you away are the same people who eventually come back needing something. And if you've ever experienced that kind of situation, you probably know how complicated it feels. Now let me tell you what happened when I finally opened the door. I opened the door just a few inches. "What do you want?" I asked. My father didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked around the hallway, then back at me, and said quietly, "We need to talk." I crossed my arms. 12 years, I said. "That's how long it took you to show up?" My mother's eyes filled with tears, but my father spoke first, and the words he said made the entire situation even stranger. "Elena, we need your help." For a moment, I considered closing the door. 12 years of silence doesn't disappear just because someone shows up looking desperate. But curiosity won, so I stepped aside and said, "You have 5 minutes." My parents walked into my living room slowly, looking around like they had entered a stranger's house, which, in a way, they had. No one spoke at first. My father stood near the couch. My mother kept twisting her hands together. Finally, I broke the silence. "You said you needed help," I said. "So talk." My father looked at my mother, then back at me, and took a slow breath. "Your brother is in trouble," he said. I blinked, because that was unexpected. My younger brother Daniel had been 13 when I left. I hadn't heard anything about him since. "What kind of trouble?" I asked. My father hesitated, then said 2 words: "Financial trouble." Apparently, Daniel had started a business, a small construction company. At first it had done well, but then the projects stopped coming, loans piled up, debt followed, and eventually the bank began asking questions. Big questions. "He owes a lot of money," my father said quietly. How much? I asked. My parents exchanged a glance. My mother answered, almost $2 million. For a moment, I thought she must be exaggerating, but her expression said otherwise. So you came to me? I said. My father nodded. You've done well for yourself. He gestured around the apartment. We heard you run a company now. That was the moment I understood something important. They hadn't come to reconnect. They came because they needed money. I leaned back in my chair. 12 years, I said again. No birthdays. No phone calls. No holidays. And now you show up because Daniel owes $2 million? My mother started crying softly, but my father kept speaking. You're his sister. I stared at him for a moment, then asked the question that had been sitting in my mind since they arrived. Why did you really send me away? The room went silent. My father looked down at the floor. My mother's crying stopped. And suddenly the air in the room felt heavier. Neither of them answered, which was answer enough. Because when people hesitate that long, it usually means the truth is worse than the story they told before. Finally, my mother whispered something that made my stomach drop. It wasn't just about school. I leaned forward slowly. What do you mean? My mother looked at my father, then back at me, her voice barely above a whisper. When you were 16, we needed you out of the house. Because of Daniel. And suddenly, the night they sent me away started to make a lot more sense. My mother wiped her eyes slowly. When you were 16, she said, Daniel was already in serious trouble. I frowned. What kind of trouble? My father answered this time. Debt. I blinked. He was 13, I said. How does a 13-year-old have debt? Neither of them looked comfortable answering that question. Finally, my father said it. Online gambling. Apparently, Daniel had found illegal betting websites, sports betting, game skins, virtual casinos. At first, it seemed small, but those sites allowed credit extensions. And eventually, the numbers became very real. When my parents discovered the situation, the amount owed was already huge, hundreds of thousands. Collectors began contacting the house, emails, phone calls, even letters threatening legal action. My parents panicked, not just because of the money, but because of what the situation could expose. We needed to focus on fixing the situation, my father said, and you were creating problems at school. I stared at him. So your solution was to send me away? My mother nodded slowly. It simplified things. Simplified. That word echoed in my head. But something still didn't make sense. You could have just told me, I said. My mother shook her head. No. Her voice trembled. You were asking too many questions. Apparently, I had noticed strange things at the time. Phone calls late at night. My parents arguing about money. Daniel locking himself in his room constantly. I had asked about it repeatedly, trying to understand what was happening. My curiosity had become inconvenient. So you labeled me the problem, I said quietly. My father didn't deny it. You leaving made everything easier, he said. No anger, no apology, just a simple statement of fact. For a moment, no one spoke. The room felt very quiet. Because in that moment, the entire truth became clear. I wasn't sent away because I was a burden. I was sent away because I noticed the truth. And my parents needed that truth hidden. And now Daniel owes $2 million, I said. My father nodded. He kept making bad decisions. My mother added quietly, we thought maybe you could help fix it. I laughed once. Not loudly. Just once. Then I asked one last question. The question that had been sitting in my mind since they knocked on the door. When you sent me away, I looked directly at them. Did you ever plan to bring me back? My parents didn't answer, and their silence told me everything. The room stayed quiet after my question. When you sent me away, did you ever plan to bring me back? My father looked down at the floor. My mother wiped her eyes again. Neither of them answered. And that silence confirmed something I had already suspected for years. They hadn't just pushed me away temporarily. They had erased me from their lives. My father finally cleared his throat. Elena, he said carefully, we understand this is difficult. Difficult. That word almost made me laugh. But Daniel is still your brother, he continued. He needs help. My mother nodded quickly. We wouldn't ask if it wasn't serious. I stood up and walked toward the window, looking out at the quiet street. 12 years earlier, I had left their house with a single suitcase. No support. No calls. No safety net. Now they were standing in my living room asking for something enormous. $2 million. I turned back toward them. Tell me something, I said calmly. When you sent me away at 16, what did Daniel say about it? My parents looked confused. My father answered slowly. He didn't say much. That answer told me everything. So let me understand this, I said. You removed me from the house to protect Daniel. My father nodded. You ignored me for 12 years. Another nod. And now you expect me to solve the problem he created? My mother whispered. We hoped you might help your family. I walked back to my chair and sat down. Then I gave them the most honest answer I could. I already helped this family, I said. They both looked confused. How? My father asked. By leaving, I said quietly. When you called me a burden, you gave me the freedom to build my own life. No expectations. No control. No family drama. Everything I built afterward happened because I learned to survive without them. My mother's voice shook. So, you won't help? I shook my head slowly. No. Not angry. Not dramatic. Just calm. Daniel made his decisions. And you made yours. My father stood up slowly. For the first time that night, he looked uncertain, like someone who had expected the conversation to end differently. My mother wiped her eyes again. They walked toward the door quietly. Before leaving, my father turned once more, but this time he didn't ask for anything. When the door closed behind them, the apartment became silent again. The same kind of silence I had known when I was 16, but this time it felt different. Because now the silence wasn't abandonment, it was peace. And the strange thing about that night was that the knock on my door didn't reopen an old chapter. It finally closed one. Thank you for staying with this story. If you enjoy calm revenge stories where the truth unfolds slowly, consider subscribing. And tell me in the comments, if someone who abandoned you years ago suddenly needed your help, what would you do? I read every single comment. There's another story waiting for you on your screen, and when you're ready, I'll see you there.